Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today as we celebrate the life and legacy of John R. Thompson, Jr. I'm Doc Walker, and for more than a decade, I had the pleasure of serving as co-host with John on the John Thompson radio show. Everyone who worked with John along the way, coaches, media members, businessmen, you knew you were fire tested because John always worked hard, never took breaks, and expected the same from everyone around him. While I'm here live at Georgetown University's historic Gaston Hall, the current situation due to the pandemic prohibits us from gathering in person today celebrating John's life. That does not, however, preclude every one of us from joining in on the conversation about how we will remember John. We will be sharing reflections and memories of Coach Thompson throughout his life on this service right here on the screen. Please use the hashtag Coach Thompson on Twitter or leave a comment on the Georgetown University Facebook live stream. We will begin today with a short video about Coach Thompson, followed by remarks from a special guest.
Born in Washington, D.C., John Thompson Jr. grew up loving sports and realized early on that athletics could be a gateway to a larger opportunity.
My first love was not basketball. My first love in sports were boxing and baseball. I was getting taller and taller, and the older guys, they said, put down that baseball. If you want an opportunity to go to school, you better get yourself on a basketball court.
Thompson led his high school to multiple championships and earned a scholarship to Providence College.
I ended up playing football since Celtics, and you saw a lot of things that you hadn't seen before. You were exposed to a lot of things, which created an interest in education to me. I wanted to be educated so that I could help.
John Thompson was hired in 1972 as the men's basketball coach at Georgetown, where he became the first African-American college basketball coach to win the NCAA Men's Division I basketball championship in 1984.
My coaching was the instrument I used to teach with. I thought, really, that you had freedom in coaching.
Coach also led his team to success off the court with a 97% graduation rate, and he kept the deflated basketball on his desk to remind players that the game wouldn't last forever. He used his position to advocate for the causes important to him. In 1989, the NCAA put forward Proposition 42 with implications for athletic eligibility that would disproportionately harm students from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Because of the success we were having as a basketball coach, and me being an African American, I had an obligation to say something about it, so I did.
Coach Thompson became one of the most visible opponents and walked off the court in protest, boycotting 2 games. He helped bring the issue to national attention and eventually led the NCAA to modify the proposition. John Thompson has left a lasting legacy on Georgetown University and the city of Washington, D.C., not only on the game of basketball, but in the ongoing fight for equality and justice.
Hi, everybody. I didn't know Coach Thompson well, but he was the kind of man where to know him was to respect him. We know his accolades. 2 NBA titles as a player, an NCAA championship, enough awards to fill multiple trophy cases. But lots of coaches have those. What made Coach Thompson special, what compelled us to celebrate his life today, is what he did to build young men, to turn them into men of character and purpose. Under his tenure, raw talent arrived at Georgetown, Ewing, Mutombo, Mourning, Iverson, so many others. Coach Thompson molded that raw talent into something better by showing them not just new skills, but new possibilities for themselves and for their lives. He wasn't easy on them. I've heard the stories, but he was even tougher on anybody who threatened what he was trying to do with his kids. When a drug kingpin was spending too much time around the team, Coach Thompson, all 6'10" of him, put his finger right in his face and told him to stay away from his kids. When an NCAA rule would have harmed the eligibility of disadvantaged students, Coach Thompson walked off the court in protest, boycotting 2 games. He was brave then. It's astonishing in hindsight. And it helped change the NCAA's stance. We haven't banished injustice from our society. Far from it. But we are living through a golden age of young black activism. We're living through a golden age of activism on the basketball court, too. Coach Thompson didn't like it when people called him a pioneer, but there's no doubt his example has echoed down the generations. There's no doubt his imprint endures. And if we really want to pay tribute to John, may we all strive to set such an example. Thanks. God bless John Thompson and the Thompson family.
Thank you, President Obama, for joining us and sharing your reflections on Coach's legacy. That a former president of the United States would join us today for this service tells you something about Coach Thompson. He was larger than life, and his impact was not just on Georgetown basketball. John cared deeply about the development of student athletes, specifically black student athletes, social justice, and in his hometown of Washington, D.C. Joining us now is the current coach of the Hoyas, a member of the 1984 NCAA championship team, and one of 4 NBA Hall of Fame players coached by Coach Thompson. Please welcome Patrick Ewing.
When I got the news that Coach Thompson had passed away, I felt like I've lost a father. Even though my father was here and I spent a significant amount of time with him, Coach Thompson was like my second dad. He was a person that when I first met him, just by the way that he carried himself as a black man, a proud black man, and as a young boy that I could want to emulate and try to be like. We lost somebody that was significant in my life. He was a person that our relationship grew over the years, from player coach to father figure, mentor, someone that I could always pick up the phone and ask advice for anything. And if it wasn't for him, I would not be the coach here at Georgetown. So I definitely miss him. He will be definitely missed, I should say. And I know he's in heaven looking down on me, cursing me out like he does from time to time, but also with pride of the work that we're doing here.
I was a manager of Coach Thompson's Hoyas from 1986 to 1988, but he was actually the manager of my life and countless others. The stirring image of Coach at the Final Four in 1982 was a moment of power and pride for African Americans. We only had TVs, no internet, no social media, and yet it went viral. Everyone wondered whether Georgetown was an HBCU. Exactly 100 years after Georgetown's most influential president, Patrick Healy, was forced to pass for white, Coach enabled Georgetown to pass for an HBCU. Towering over that first Final Four, Coach instilled confidence in our people everywhere. We began to wear the starter jackets and the Georgetown swag. Coach represented an invincible black America because he was an invincible black man. And we all needed a father or an extra father because even the fathers in our lives were beaten down. He gave even the brothers on the block something better for which to hope. That is why they responded when Coach called. And then to win the national championship in 1984, to go and stand before Ronald Reagan and fulfill the scripture. We who were like grasshoppers before a giant didn't look like grasshoppers anymore with Coach standing over top of Reagan. The grasshoppers became giants and the giant a grasshopper. There wasn't a social justice movement in my life I was involved in that Coach and I didn't discuss. Coach valued the Million Man March so, but the Million Man March actually began with him because of the pride he instilled in the African American community. What team had ever rocked the kente cloth of our African glory? What other coach first bridged the Atlantic Ocean of our Middle Passage to reach and to recruit young men from our homeland? On Election Day in 2008, I called Coach on his radio show to thank him for what he had done to help bring about the election of the first African American president. He said, Mark, what in the hell are you talking about? I said, Coach, you helped to raise our dream ceiling. 715 home runs, ceiling. 3 heavyweight titles, ceiling. But then you took us higher to 3 Final Fours, begetting loftier dreams like the presidency. Every round goes higher and higher. So you are as important to making this day happen as anyone else. Coach said, Mark, get the hell off my show before you make me cry. Our last conversation was a few weeks before he passed, when he called me from the hospital. He asked, Mark, all this Black Lives Matter marching and protesting, what is it really doing? Is it really making a difference? We talked for over an hour about the plight of our people. He was restless, wanting to know more about what seems to be a civil war brewing. Even in the hospital, Coach was concerned about another civil war in America. Coach was concerned about the blue and the gray. Coach lived the gospel that shares his name. He had a vibrant faith, and because of that faith, he could perform the miracle of going to a Catholic university, having been asked to turn a floundering program into sparkling NIT water, instead turning it into NCAA championship wine. Coach could perform the miracle of providing a way for a multitude of Black coaches to follow him. Between 1978 and 1991, the number of African-American Division I basketball coaches rose from 7 to 34. Coach could perform the miracle of walking on the turbulent waters of racial justice by walking off the court in protest of Proposition 42. Coach could throw that towel over his shoulder, his mother's potholder, and perform the miracle of being our potter and us his clay. And so when we say, what rocks Hoya Saxa, we know now our existence is not 8 to 10 pounds of air. Our existence is 6 feet 10 inches of solid rock. Coach, you exalted us as Black men above our enemies. You were the rock upon which we were set high. You hid us in the shelter of your protection. We will honor your children and your grandchildren in your memory for the rest of our days. Coach, you've won the greatest victory of all, victory over death. Your name and your legacy will live on forever, and your work will live on forever too, for we, your disciples, will continue it. Thank you, Coach. Amen.
That powerful message, Reverend Thompson. Coach made his impact with both large and seemingly small actions. In 1989, Coach famously boycotted 2 games in protest of the NCAA Proposition 42. And he said, I've done this because out of frustration, you're limited in your options of what you can do in response to something I felt was very wrong. This is my way of bringing attention to a rule a lot of people were not aware of, one in which will affect a great many individuals. Coach also worked for many years as a member of the board of directors of Nike, helping to shape the company into the international corporation it is today. While a member of the board, Coach worked with Nike to add the kente cloth to the Hoyas uniform. The following video was originally scheduled to play at his celebration of retirement for Nike this September.
Since 1991, Coach John Thompson Jr. has brought his powerful voice and steady leadership to the boardroom as a member of Nike's board of directors. In so many ways, he has served as one of our most important guiding lights. If you know Coach, you know that he is rarely the loudest person in the room, but his voice is the one that you always listen for and one that you remember.
It is a personal honor for me to enshrine you as a coach into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame.
This is not my image, but who the hell cares about image today?
Well, my impression of John Thompson started well before I was on the Nike board. John Thompson was one of those legendary coaches and legendary leaders. It was always about his players. He brought a quiet sense of discipline, empathy, and it was really clear he expected his teams to play as a team.
He understands how the athlete views things, how the athlete feels.
He has this unbelievable insight into the mind of an athlete. It's just second to none.
He actually has a very soft quiet voice, but it clearly echoes.
I mean, the thing that always struck me about Coach Thompson from a distance that has been confirmed is how thoughtful he is.
He loves Nike, and his advice and counsel was to make Nike the best that it can be. And I knew that Coach Thompson was someone who believed in coaching people really hard.
Coach Thompson is aptly named coach. If you've never played for him, you still feel like you're on his team.
I love Coach for his wisdom, his talent, his grit, his passion, his work ethic. But most of all, I love him for his deep-seated desire to make sure we all win together.
His example in his own life is one that all of us should aspire to, whether it's the way he coached, whether the way he raised his family, his contribution to the community. We've just been blessed to have him on this board for all these years.
Speaking personally, it's been an honor to learn from him. We celebrate all his incredible contributions to Nike and the world of sport.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks for your wisdom and your guidance and the tremendous impact you've made and will continue to make on me and on Nike.
Congratulations for having these 30 years in Nike. You have reached so many lives, and I just want to thank you for reaching mine.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of something that we could all believe in.
I can't thank you enough for what you've done for me. I also am so proud to see what you've done and how you've inspired so many more.
We're so excited to celebrate you. There's nobody more deserving and more iconic. Thank you for being somebody that has just changed the course of our lives and our path.
Thank you, John Thompson. Thank you for all the things you've done for me, Nike, and the world.
This is Phil Knight. I knew John Thompson for almost 50 years. I knew him in a lot of different capacities. I knew him as a coach, as an endorser, as a mentor, as a board member, and a friend. He says, I met him almost those 50 years ago through Sonny Vaccaro, who we had hired to help us get into the college basketball game. Nike had a few professional players, which are easy to find because they all got agents. But the good basketball coaches, most of the great ones with the big programs, were already taken by some other shoe company. So we asked Sonny to help us get the next best. And he got some good ones. We got Lute Olson and Eddie Sutton and Abe Lemons and Jerry Tarkanian. But he said, I recommend you take a chance on two promising young coaches, Jim Valvano and John Thompson. So I went out to meet with those two coaches. I signed Jim Valvano, and I went to meet with John Thompson. Jim Valvano was very affable. John Thompson is a lot of things, but I wouldn't think you'd call him affable. And I was a bit intimidated in that first meeting. But our meetings grew over the years, and it wasn't very long before Georgetown became Nike's signature basketball team. So we came from out west as a small company, fighting the establishment shoe companies with a chip on our shoulder. Very much like Georgetown and the college basketball scene. And Georgetown continued to succeed, and we actually took out a billboard in Washington, D.C. featuring John Thompson in those early days, which is all our marketing budget will allow. Shortly after Nike went public in 1980, that we realized that we had our all-white male board had to have a woman board member and an African-American board member. And the woman board member was Jill Conway, the president of Smith College, and the board member we selected was John Thompson, because I knew nobody would take him as a token. Ralph D'Annunzio, who was on our board at the time, had been president of the New York Stock Exchange and was CEO of Kidder Peabody, was aghast. He had never met John Thompson, but what he had read about him alarmed him. He said, he'll be a disruptive influence. And I said, trust me, he'll be great. And John Thompson and Ralph D'Annunzio, within a very short time, became very fast friends, communicating till the end of John's days. And John did prove to be, in his almost 30 years on the board, a great board member. He contributed in not only just the basketball, which was our most important sport, but also he had a great insight into human relations, public relations, overall marketing, and society in general. When Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, came on the board, within 2 meetings, he says, John Thompson is far more than a basketball coach. And I think that also applies to John's role in society in general. He wasn't just a basketball coach. He contributed enormous to the society in total. When George Raveling called me on the night of John's death and told me what had happened, I was in complete shock. Even though I knew he had been in ill health, I just always thought of John Thompson as indestructible. And through my tears, I thought back and realized how much I loved the band, how much he had meant to me personally, how many great moments we'd had, but I knew how much I'd miss him in the years to come. But one thing is for sure, I will hear John's voice till the end of my days.
I'm now joined by 4 recent Georgetown graduates and former players of the Hoyas men's and women's basketball teams. While they were not coached by John, he had a great impact on all of their lives and careers. Monica, while John was known for being the men's coach, you recently wrote for The Undefeated about Coach's impact on you and your teammates on the women's squad. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, Doc, everyone knows Big John sat in that big wooden chair inside of McDonough, and he wasn't just there for the men's practices. I mean, he was available to us. He encouraged us. He was thrilled for our success, and he got on us when we weren't playing well, too. But in that piece in particular, it was his relationship with my teammate and good friend and current WNBA pro, Sugar Rogers, that really stands out, because she's a kid who came to Georgetown off the strength of her talent as a basketball player, and Coach John truly helps her blossom into so much more than just an athlete.
Roy, you went from Georgetown to be have a successful career in the NBA, and now you're working on the player development side. What lessons did you learn from Coach Thompson that you're now passing on to these players?
First and foremost, thanks for having me here, but Big Coach was inspiration. The words that come to mind are always tough love. And he was really tough pretty much on, me throughout my whole career into my NBA career. There wouldn't be a day or a text message I wouldn't get where he would tell me what I should be doing, but at the same time, give me words of encouragement and talk me up as well. So going into my NBA coaching career, I want to have the same type of effect. I want to be able to have tough love and be able to hold guys accountable, but then also build them up as well. I think accountability is something that Big Coach really embodied.
John, until recently, you served as a member of Patrick Ewing's staff, meaning that you frequently worked with Coach Thompson, and now you're a part of the Denver Nuggets staff. How did Coach Thompson's mentorship give you insight into transitioning from player to staff?
Well, Coach was a unique individual, and not only was his, physical stature physically imposing and his voice being a loud voice in the room, one of the things that I definitely took from, the mentorship that I received from over the years was his ability to nurture the holistic approach towards individuals, whether it be on the court or, in other business areas of the game of basketball. That's one of the things that I feel like I've been able to take with me, because it is, in a lot of cases, much more than a game. And these are platforms by which we're allowed to teach and nurture individuals who are coming up to, produce a product on the floor that's on one hand for entertainment, but on the other aspect, they want to further themselves in life as well. So that's one of the things I took with me.
Jeff, this last season with the Rockets, we saw a big team effort that echoed your years on the hilltop. Do you feel that team's mentality was built into the foundation that Coach Thompson instilled in this program?
Of course. I think that's with any basketball culture around the world. You saw, first and foremost, how he got everybody to play for each other, to be there for their brothers, to understand that there's no I in team and that the only way to win is to play together. And I lived by that throughout my whole careers, and knowing that the only way you can make it to the next level and trying to win a championship is playing together and being there for your team. So his words, his actions, and the way he coached, it will always live for me throughout my career, whether that's on the basketball court or somewhere else in a business atmosphere.
In a couple of minutes that we have left, could each of you tell us about how Coach Thompson served as a mentor for you and how you will remember him? Let's start with Monica.
Wow, that's such a great question, Doc. And you remember me probably as a senior trying to make my way into sports media. And at the time, Coach Thompson still had his radio show with you, and obviously was still working for Turner on the NCAA, March Madness, and so many other different activities. But he was literally willing to give me contacts to put his name out there on my behalf and to push me forward. So that, again, was just even bigger than the game of basketball, because my time as an athlete was beginning to wind down. And so I'm forever grateful. In fact, the last time I had an opportunity to have a conversation with Big Coach, he asked me what my updates were on the career front and told me that he was proud of me and to keep going.
Roy?
Of your question, I would have to say giving back. Like I think that his mentorship was definitely, it led me to give back. You know, so many times that, you know, he would get on me while I was in the NBA saying, why haven't you come back? Why these young kids need you? They need to learn what you know from your playing days at Georgetown and your playing days in the NBA. So, I mean, it kind of helped guide me during the summers. I would come back. I know throughout the year that we had the NBA lockout, we Jeff, myself, and a couple guys are at practice every day working with the young players. So I think that he kind of like unknowingly funneled me into like coaching and stuff like that. So not just about basketball, but you know, he definitely had an impact on me in that way.
John?
One of the things that resonate and will always resonate with me from Coach was he would always say, this is not a 9 to 5, this is a task-oriented job. You know, and by that, you know, his ability to be able to get out the box and meet individuals across the board, no matter who they were, on their level, and able to communicate and actually take ownership in getting to know who they were so that he can in return not only be, in some cases, more servant leadership, but at the same time have an authoritative style in running a company or running an organization such as Georgetown University.
And Jeff?
Just to go off what Roy said, you know, being able to pass that knowledge forward that was given to us through, you know, the alums, the guys who came before us, coming back, being in the community, also coming back to the school and, you know, talking to the younger guys and, you know, allowing them to, you know what's ahead of them, you know, whether that's on the basketball court or on the business front, helping them understand that, you know, we've been through what they're about to go through. So to help them, you know, further gain knowledge on, you know, whatever avenue they take, helping them understand that we've been through it and we're here to help in whatever way we can.
I want to thank all of you for taking time to join me today as we remember Coach Thompson. John was instrumental in putting the Big East Conference on the map and helped establish some of the greatest rivalries in college basketball. While the league may look a little different today, Big East basketball has continued the vision of those founding presidents, ADs, and coaches. Not only did John reach the pinnacle of the sport, but he earned the respect of his peers along the way.
John Thompson said, "Kiss Syracuse goodbye." That comment did not sit well with Jim Boeheim. One more bit of space added to this rivalry by Thompson to Young.
If he had to wear the black hat, so be it. If he had to be the villain, so be it. He got who he was, how to get his program to where it was. John didn't beat you with the baseball bat. John beat you with his mind.
Boy, I remember those games, the players, the coaches, the rivalries. They truly built the league. In recent days, we asked several of John's colleagues how they would remember him. And here's how some of those said they would best remember Big Coach.
John Thompson, known as Big John in Syracuse, became someone who our fans couldn't wait to see and give their ultimate respect to
Coach Thompson meant the world to me. He was an African-American coach who won a national championship, who put a Catholic school on the national stage. He talked about integrity. He talked about character. He cared about his players.
I feel like I've known Coach John Thompson my entire life. Thanks to the great friendship that my dad, Dave Gavitt, and John shared.
You know, I feel that I lost a brother, a tremendous friend, and a person that I would follow to the end of the world.
He mentored and helped so many young coaches, both white and black coaches.
John was tremendous in standing up for what was right.
His legacy will forever be known for his care of humanity, and he always stood up for his players.
What Coach Thompson did to support young black men and the advancement of black players and black coaches will be felt for decades to come.
He was Big John. He always will be Big John. And I'm just proud that I had the opportunity to compete against him for so many years. Rest in peace.
Our sincere condolences to John, to Ronnie, to Tiffany, and their entire families. We will never forget Coach John Thompson.
So we will miss the big fella, my friend. We will miss the towel that hung around his neck or on his shoulder. We will miss him jumping up and challenging the officials. We will miss the way his players played.
I love you, Coach. You'll always be in my heart.
As you have heard, John Thompson was not just a colleague, but a mentor and a leader among the coaching community. He was also a leader within his beloved hometown of Washington, D.C. The John R. Thompson Jr. Legacy of a Dream Award, established in 2003, is presented each year on Martin Luther King Jr. Day by Georgetown University to an impactful local leader working to address issues of racial and social justice in the Washington, D.C. community. The Thompson family has requested that memorial donations be made to a fund to award recipients grants to help advance the mission of their organizations. More information on how to contribute to this fund is available as a comment on the Facebook live stream. John Thompson's impact was felt across the city of Washington. As in the city navigated challenges, moments through the 1980s, John provided invaluable leadership. And his care for his players knew no bounds. In 1989, Nightline produced a TV special on the District of Columbia. Nightline host Ted Koppel was part of a town hall meeting held a few weeks after the arrest of Rayful Edmonds III, who was later convicted of drug distribution. It was during that Nightline special that John revealed he had met with Edmond and asked him to stay away from his team at Georgetown. We have two clips of John speaking at the town hall.
Live from Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church in Anacostia in the District of Columbia, this is a special edition of Nightline, a national town meeting, D.C. divided city. Once again, Ted Koppel.
And I would like to turn right away to Coach John Thompson of the Georgetown Hoyas. Coach, we spent some time together over the weekend, and one of the points you made to me that I raised before you came during the last hour, and I'd like to have you talk to it for a moment, is the vulnerability of some of these young people today as compared to the way it was 20, 30 years ago when you and I were their age.
Well,
I'll tell you, you're the one man in this hall who doesn't have to stand up.
It doesn't matter. I think I better stand up to get above some of this bull. I think, you know, Ted, first of all, one of the things that I said when we were traveling around is that, I can, in Washington, draw a crowd in most places because of the attention that is given to basketball, and kids will run and ask me to sign autographs, and I'm flattered by that, you know, and people tell me that because you're in that position that sometimes you're a role model. But I can't, you know, in my greatest hour, talk one kid into not using or selling drugs. You know, I don't have that ability. And that frustrates the hell out of me, to be very honest with you. I think that one of the things that I said to you is that when I was older, you know, not to rationalize or anything, when I was younger, not to rationalize anything, the level of illegal traffic was much older than the younger kids that we have today. And those people had somewhat of an unwritten code at times to protect the young, because that was the only way. And I'm not certain that in some instances, some of the kids that we have now don't perceive it as being the only way, as getting out of what they're getting in. And I think that one of the things that frustrates me, I agree very much with the Nation of Islam. And that's why I went, that's why, but yet at the same token, I don't accuse anybody in here of anything. I think we've got to try to find a solution. But I'm not smart enough to statistically understand what has been said in here today. And that's why I don't use statistics in basketball. But in the same token, I think that we've got to understand that there is an immediate problem while all of this conversation is going on that we've got to solve, because our kids are being exposed to and our kids are using and our kids are afraid. We're not talking about druggies, we're talking about our neighbors' kids. That's right. And I think that if these people violate the law, I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement that these people should be incarcerated if you go through the normal process. And I don't mean to make a speech, but where my fear and where my frustration comes into it is that we have a tendency sometimes to say, well, the mayor's not doing what he's supposed to do, the chief is not doing what he's supposed to do. Hell, because I'm afraid to wait until the process works out, I went to talk to the people that were involved. I can't wait for the process to handle, because that's not, see, and from listening, I think we all are struggling to make the process work. But when I approached Mr. Edmonds, and I was exposed to what he did by the media, you know, I didn't go to accuse him of anything. And I want to make something very clear. None of my players at Georgetown University were ever accused of anything. My players went voluntarily as citizens of the District of Columbia who went back to the neighborhoods where they live. If you don't go back, you're accused of forgetting where you come from. You know,
Coach Thompson?
If you go back, and I want to say this because I probably, you know, have been on that same line that you guys have been on, because I wanted to talk to Mr. Edmonds, not to honor him or to worship him or to accuse him of anything. I was asking and pleading as a coach responsible for so many people that if something is going on, for God's sakes, help me and let me know. For God's sakes, try to stop me. And that is why I'm waiting for the process to go on. But I honestly and sincerely think that the word of mouth, the communication, I get calls at Georgetown because people respect the program. But we've got to, as neighbors to neighbors, somebody will pick up a phone and tell me if one of my players did. And one thing you got to make, and I don't want to be defensive about it, in the fact that they were never demanded to come in. They came in voluntarily. I was questioned, Ted, because I was involved. The Nation of Islam would be questioned, too, if you walk in the street and you get involved. But I think that what he's saying, which is very important, is that I saw, and I think we've got to remember that sometimes, I saw the whole city function in cooperation in that whole situation. And I think that that's extremely important. You know, that we come out and I hear, and I hear us, and we do that a little bit too much. I just think, you know, we're placing blame. All of us are afraid or frustrated or stupid as hell if we know the solution. You know what I mean? But I think that what happens a lot of times is that we are visible. If you think a young black kid, our kids went back to play with their neighbors. They didn't go back to play with drug dealers, and I think we got to understand that. You know, they went back to play. When you go to the chapter, as your documentary said, how many options do we have, Kathy, to go to dance? And when I said, who goes to the chapter, my son raised his hand. My son raised his hand, but nobody ever said anybody used any drugs, sold any drugs. The cooperative spirit I saw function.
But you were scared as hell, weren't you?
Sure, I was scared as hell. Ted, I was more than scared than that. If we weren't in the church, I would tell you very much so. But I think because I think that when that happens, all of us are afraid who are in here. I have heard nothing but fear being expressed because we're trying to find a solution.
Mr. Wilder, and then we have to take a break.
Coach was an extraordinary influence on so many people. He cared for his players, he cared for his community, and he cared for his family. He was a man of deep faith.
We wanted to touch the scripture and touch John's devotion. His devotion especially to this lady, Mary, the mother of Jesus. We are sitting in a courtyard dedicated to Mary, and this is one of Coach Thompson's big quotes. Say one to the lady. That's the invitation today, that each of us says one to the lady. For John, for Georgetown, for all the good that can come from organized sport, from all the good that can come to blending the kind of Jesuit education and competition that's part and parcel of our academic and athletic pursuits. You come to the 19th chapter of John's Gospel, you understand that John, after whom our coach John is named, John has a real sense of Jesus coming into his glory even on the cross. He's still in charge on the cross. He's still teaching. And he teaches from the cross. Around the cross in chapter 19, verse 26 and 27, were Mary and the other Mary and the women and the disciple whom he loved. And he addresses the disciple whom he loved. He says, "Here is your mother." This is after he tells Mary, "Here is your son." You get the exchange? From that hour, the scripture says, the disciple took her into his home. That's the invitation today, that we, as we remember John, would take Mary, the Mother of God, and all that that represents into our hearts and into our homes. When we come together and understand that Mary's with us, that God is with us regardless of where we are and in what trouble we're in, or whether the score is not where we want it to be, we call on Mary. We call on Mary to lift us, to help us, to hold us. Hail Mary, full of grace. Pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hoya Saxon.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand.
many things off the court, Coach was nonetheless best known for his coaching skills. Famously draped with a towel over his shoulder, John led his teams to multiple Final Fours and became the first black coach to win an NCAA championship. Something he would be quick to remind us was due to the lack of opportunity, not the lack of ability. Enshrined himself in 1999, Coach Thompson's teams included 4 future Naismith Hall of Fame members, and he led the U.S. Olympic team to a bronze medal in 1988, the last games without professional players. Now we'll hear from a few of those whom John coached to hear about how he has impacted their lives.
Coach Thompson was a teacher, a hero, a mentor, and a father figure for so many of us.
He let me know that there were options. I never thought about going to college, but he convinced me that it was an option for me.
Some people come in your life for a reason, a season, and for a lifetime. You are a part of my lifetime that has made me the man that I am.
He created an environment where we could be successful, and the legacy he's left for me is that it's carried over for me for 40 years.
A legacy of excellence, a legacy of service, a legacy of making a difference in the lives of others. Most importantly, a legacy of standing up for what you believe in.
And it makes me be a better man because I can stand up for things that I really believe in because of you and being under your tutelage.
Coach, may you rest in peace in heaven. We miss you, and your legacy will live on us forever.
Our community is built on a set of shared values. When we commit ourselves to these values, they provide us with the best opportunity to realize our full promise. But values can be abstractions. They have to be lived. They come alive in each of us by the choices we make, by the activities in which we engage, by the people we share our lives with. For 48 years, through his moral leadership, his commitment to excellence, his vision for equity and opportunity, John brought these values to life in our community. The deflated basketball he placed on his desk, symbolizing the way he cared for the future of the young men he brought to Georgetown. His first instinct in the Superdome to hug Freddie Brown, and a few more hugs 2 years later in Seattle, exemplifying persistence and excellence. That sweater, that night in the Garden in 1985, reminding everyone that this was college basketball. When he walked off the court in 1989, defending those seeking an opportunity. His 97% graduation rate, ensuring the academic success of his students. John provided us with new ways to imagine, to interpret our values, enabling all of us to see possibilities for what we could be as individuals and as a university that had not been realized before he joined our community. He led us to a place where we might better be able to live up to our ideals. He brought a moral imagination, showing us what it meant to be engaged in the work of becoming true to your ideals. He had a very different idea of what it meant to be a head men's basketball coach. John was a teacher, a mentor, an extraordinary leader. He demanded the best of us and brought out the best in us. He held us true to our values. We were privileged to be at Georgetown at the same time that John Thompson was here. You can live your whole life and not have the opportunity to know someone like John Thompson. We had the opportunity for 48 years. We are the university that we are today because of John Thompson.
This is a letter to my father. Your love is stuck in my throat without words to translate emotion. And 1,000 poems have not been able to encapsulate your memory for me, but mostly because I'm not ready to say aloud that memory is what I have left of you. In the weeks that have passed, I've been comforted and told to call on my ancestors because now you're one of them. To pray, to cry, to scream, to dream without sleeping of you, and to wait with the promise that it will get easier, but not better. Just to hold on to your love and your life in mind. With no control, I often hear your voice without expecting it, not in some place of my subconscious, but on my TV, reminding me that others are holding on to you too, and I have to share you with them. When I just want to keep you for myself and our family. These voices keep reminding me not to be fooled by those who pretend to love you now that you're gone, and I will not be fooled by those pretending to love me in memory of you. But I yield to the knowledge that sharing you is what has always set you free, and so I do. Day by day, I will pray to the Lady and breathe in the life that you have given me and get stronger, like you wanted me to, like you hoped I would be, and hope that you feel that your presence here with us is exactly what has prepared us to live out your legacy. And speaking for me, I promise you, that's precisely what I plan to do. I love you.
Thank you, Tiffany, for that beautiful message. And thank you to John and Ronnie for sharing your father with all of us for all of these years. Having John Thompson in my life was a godsend. I lost my dad at 17 years old. Coach provided leadership from a male perspective that was needed for me to develop into a leader. I'd like to thank his family for sharing their father with me and many others. May God rest his soul and continue to bless all that he loved. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate the life of John R. Thompson, Jr. And a special thank you to President DeGioia and the team at Georgetown University for pulling this service together. Coach Thompson famously said, "When I'm gone, if I can't go to heaven, take me back to Georgetown." While we know he's up there looking down upon us, there's always room for him here at Georgetown.
Thank you.